Welcome, everybody, to the Integrate Yourself podcast. We're your host, Allison Pillow and Maja Gottlieb. Today, we're here with Katy Bowman. She, if you guys don't know about Katy Bowman, she's pretty much what we like to call the Martha Stewart of movement. She has written 7 books. And, 4 of which I have. The 4 that I have are Move Your DNA, Diastasis Recti, Dynamic Aging, and Movement Matters. Those last 2 are her latest books. We're so happy to have her on the show. It's such an honor. Katy, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I think I need an explanation of the Martha Stewart.
I knew you were gonna...
And I was like, what is it about Martha? Like, what are our overlaps? So, well, we can talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, well, I think for me, it's like you're just so creative with how you present movement to people, and there's always it's always in such a very a neat way that's just perfectly put together. So that's kind of why I think of you as that, because every time I see your Instagram or your the books that you put together, it's just neatly put together and just so easy to understand. And it's beautiful. So thank you for putting that out there.
Oh, well, thanks for that. Because I'm the opposite of neat. Well, I appreciate the comparison, so I can definitely neatly package ideas, but it leaves behind it quite the wake, and it displaces a lot of other things into basically mess all around me. So I'll just take the comparison and say thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it's just the way I see what you produce and what you put out there, and it's always something that I'm kind of already thinking about, but I haven't really been able to express it that way, and it's just the way you express it is really, really great, and I appreciate it. I would really like to start, Katy, by asking you how you actually came into all this. I know that listening to your podcast, which, by the way, everybody, if you haven't heard Katy's podcast, Katy Says is the name of it, and it's an excellent podcast and really great information as well. She has a website called Nutritious Movement. My question for you, Katy, is how did you get into this? How did you come into the conclusion to equate movement to nutrition, and even getting to the point where you're we really don't need to be sitting on furniture, and moving from California to where you are now, and is it Sequim, Washington? I don't know if I pronounced that right, but it's just kind of amazing all the the conclusions that you've drawn and come to with your work. And I was just wondering, what was the inspiration? What was the aha moment that led you to that?
So you are looking at a 20-year body of work of processing, and when you in academics or really anything that you're pursuing for a long time, the complexity just gets deeper the longer you study something, so I don't think it's different than anything else. I think a lot of times there's a superficial understanding of how something works, and it seems to be fairly discrete, meaning just self-contained as a set of facts. But as you start to understand something and you understand the complexity, then you start to see it from a more ecological perspective. I think ecology is the easiest way it's a way that people understand, oh yes, when you understand ecology, you realize that you're considering more parts. And the same goes for movement. How I got to the nutritious movement, again, those are all fairly recent, within the last 3 or 4 years of helping. I found that teaching movement through a nutritional lens just helped capitalize on the nutritional understanding.
Yeah.
The groundwork that nutritional science had already laid, so we didn't have to go through the 100-year or 500-year process of understanding how macronutrients and micronutrients and vitamins and minerals were identified and came to be. We all got them at the kindergarten level, just saying, hey, you need vitamins and minerals. So it all, we have this understanding, but it's because it was put into our brains as children that we have a framework for it. We don't have that for movement. You know, no one was given that you need movement and the different types of movement as a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old. So it all seems radical and new to all of us hearing it at 30 and 40 and 50 and 60. But it is how information has always been given. But I did capitalize on nutrition because nutrition and movement, there's definitely a group of people who are interested in wellness as a culture. And so they usually started with food first before they started with movement. So it was a really easy way to, instead of explaining all these complicated things, just to say, yeah, you need a diversity of foods, you need a diversity of movement. Here's how you can think about it and why. And that's how I came to that conclusion, was just going, oh, okay, we know we need more movement, but we already had, it's not just enough movement, because you could take endurance runners, right? And then you would find that for decades, people have been recommending cross training. It's like, you can't only be an endurance runner. You have to do some strength. You definitely have to make sure you're going to stretch, or else you're going to be more prone to injury. And then you go to physio, and the physio is going, okay, runner who's also cross training, you know, why your knee keeps tweaking, your back keeps tweaking, is you got like this one muscle right here that's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So here's some corrective exercises. So I just took all of that understanding that people are familiar with and said, this is the same thing we do with food. We balance macronutrients, we balance micronutrients, explained a little bit of the science behind why we need to do that. And voila, I had a whole paradigm of movement that just, the track was already set that could just drop right in. So it's just the understanding. And then, you know, like something about the furniture in my house, or that is that ecological model of, hey, we're not just bodies moving around in a vacuum. You're moving around in your house. You are interacting with the temperatures, the furniture, the trees or not, the car. These are environments that are moving you. And so as you're thinking, when you think about something very deeply, you think about the context in which it's happening. And then I was like, okay, so you know the physiotherapy you've been getting for your knee and your hip? Well, let me show you the thing that you're doing in your regular life that kind of is creating the need for that. So that instead of just choosing more therapy, you could actually choose less of the thing that got you the need for the therapy. So it's just, again, the larger idea of trying to create strategies for people to help get them moving more of them, and also enjoying their life more, you know, so that they're not dealing with like niggling aches and pains, and they're not constantly stressed by the idea that you need to exercise more, but meanwhile, no one's really giving you any sort of ways for that. I mean, like, you get stuff like, oh, sitting is the new smoking, so you can't sit, but what are you supposed to do? If you live in a sedentary culture, there's no examples for how to not sit. There's no examples for what a house with less sitting looks like. So I think a large part of my job is simply role modeling.
Yeah.
You know, basically giving up a certain amount of privacy of my own life to be able to show not only that it is possible, but how it can be done in a stepwise fashion. So that's where we are today.
Well, yeah, I love the idea that you're a role model, because that's where I find a lot of us have lost, is that role model that actually shows us how to integrate everything in. Because as you were talking, I was thinking about so many things that people are oblivious to in their habits, and where they all of a sudden wake up to a pain and say, I'm not sure how this all occurred. And then they go to physio, and they go to physical therapy, and then they do these these little you know, exercises to help themselves, but the issue is it doesn't last, because it's just a spot of the time that they're trying to fix something, and it hasn't really fixed the core issue. And in your book, Movement Matters, I love that part that you talk about is about finding a mission for your own like family and your values, because that really hit a core for me. Because if you really don't know how clear you are about your mission of your own life, like, what do I value? What do I want to see going on in my life? You won't go to that extent of saying, wait a minute, I don't need that chair, or I don't need that way of movement. I need to go this way because that enriches. And then what I kind of felt came from that was how you came up with the stacking, and where that all has importance is because it's different from multitasking. Can you talk a little bit about all that? I know I threw a lot in there,
but well, so we live in an expert culture, right? Where we don't have we have full, I believe, intuition and upwellings all the time of like being driven into certain behaviors. And then on top of that, you have all of what your mind's telling you you should or shouldn't do based on what you read, so you've got a cultural context going on. There's behaviors that you're doing simply because someone role modeled them for you. And I've been really tuned into this, having little kids. I'm like, the things that they're seeing me do and the way that I'm answering questions are setting up their truths. They don't have any way to know what is true or not, like they just know what I'm doing. And I mean, nor do I know what I'm doing is being truth or not. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, but that's the way that we work. Like, we're handing down survival mechanisms, like from a biological standpoint, like I survived and this is my truth. So here are these truths and good luck, So you've got your parents' survival mechanisms, or whoever you were around, that community of people, you've their truths. And then you've got your own intuitive truths that maybe be conflicting with those other ones that you received. And then you have expert culture, which are people who are researching or who have other knowledge systems that have been amassed or grouped or figured out or derived. And then those are constantly being broadcasted. So you're constantly negotiating between all of them. And so like you're trying every decision that you're doing, and there's 10,000 of them or more a day, minute by minute you're making them, and a lot of them are on autopilot, but they're still passing through all of these filters, whether you know it or not. And I just got to the point where trying to decide what's right or wrong, just realizing that right or wrong, there are no really inherent right or wrongs. There's mostly just how they're lining up with where you've decided you want to go. And so I was like, well, I've had businesses for years. I've pursued academic degrees for years. And in all those scenarios, you have like some understanding of what your end goal is, right? You're not just, woo, this would be fun to do. Like you have these benchmarks that you're deciding, like you wouldn't want to take, if you're trying to get a degree, you wouldn't want to take a class that didn't get you towards that degree. If you're going to school just simply to be exposed to something you didn't know before, then taking things outside of that degree curriculum would be the right decision. So you just have to decide what it is that you're trying to pursue, and then your alignment points for your decisions, if you will, reflect that. But I just recognize that like I didn't actually know where I wanted to go with my life. Like why did I even go to college? Just because someone told me that I should, so, okay, I had those bullet points. And then like later on, I really realized that it was intuitively for me also where I wanted to go, because I just had this deep craving for knowledge or this thing. So those two happened to reconcile. But there's been lots of things that I've pursued that I turned out like weren't in alignment with who I actually was inside. So I'm spending a lifetime letting those go at the same time as like learning how to tune in the receiver a bit to my intuition, which I was actually kind of systematically trained to not listen to. So getting the skills for listening to that again. And then, of course, I love the pursuit of my own database of interests. And, so I do that. But so mission statement was super helpful. It's in Movement Matters, the process of how to do it. And like I have a personal mission statement, and I have a family mission statement, because you are a separate entity from your own family. And so you want to make sure that, and they're dynamic. Because as the people within your community or family change, they might need the entire family's mission statement to change to still be included within that family. And that doesn't always happens. Sometimes like, well, the family does this, and then someone comes who's an outlier who's like, but then I can't be part of this family if the family's mission and my mission don't align. Are you willing, in a couple's relationships, friendships, like you're constantly doing that? I just like concrete details on paper, and sometimes I feel like I have a total mission statement in my head. But for years I thought that I had a mission statement, but I just didn't. Like I was fooling myself because it took the work to fuse my own mind rather than just defaulting to, again, all those other things in my mind, like what do you actually want, what do you put it down on paper, write, brainstorm, and it made it concrete. And then now I actually had a beacon. Like I wasn't just fooling myself that I had a beacon. So mission statements are great. And the first part you're asking about role modeling, like I do think that we need role models. There's a lot of, like I said, I have a hashtag that I use a lot, which is practice what you publish, because a lot of times experts or, scientific pursuits or whatever, they're not necessarily tied to any application or people doing the thing, because when you actually do the thing, you discover the nuances. So maybe that's also part of my journey of how do I start linking these things up, is because I'm actually doing it. Like I'm not read the research, integrate the words and the data on paper that are very hollow. Yeah, I do it. And then when you do it, you have an in situ or in situational experience, and you go, well, here's the 7 things that no one mentioned when trying to do this. I also have I've got tens of thousands of people doing it in their in their situation. And they'll say, well, here's something that you didn't consider that I found when I tried this thing. But then they communicate that with me. And then that integrates in. So again, it's like a very large body. Like you have this very large network of people experimenting and feeding back. And so it's just been very successful, because not only do we get the diversity of movements, we get a diversity of people doing the movements in diverse contexts. And then your understanding of movement becomes quickly 3-dimensional. Yeah. And so that's just like Martha Stewart is never like Martha Stewart is on the backbone of a lot of other people doing lots of different things. So it's the same thing. Some brilliant line that I might write has maybe come from 3 or 4 different people who, when they explain their situation, I was like, oh, of course, then X, Y, and Z, and then I can put X, Y, and Z in. So it's just a very large, dynamic, loving group of people.
Yeah, so it makes a really good point about how much community is a part of your life, and that what you're doing is participating not only in this smaller community that you live, but in the world. And you talk about how even movement affects how you move in the world, and what you take for granted in terms of who's doing the processing part. You talk about like how we process a lot more than we realize out in the world, and then when we get the fine product, we're like, oh, this is kind of cute and nice, but we didn't really see all the energy that goes into that little product. So I really like that part. I was wondering about the stacking and the multitasking, because you talk about how they're different and how great that is, because I think a lot of people may get overwhelmed when they say, oh, I'm going to multitask. Or if we talk about like the Martha Stewart thing, is like, I can't do all that. That's too much. It's like having Julia Child recipe and you're going, do you know how many hours it's taking to prepare just to get started?
Right. So stacking is the solution. In the end, it's how you pursue the tasks in your life. So I do think we're a multitasking generation, right? Where there's so much to do that the most successful people figure out how to do many things at once, right? Or at least 2 things at once, where you take your phone calls while walking on your treadmill, so you're getting your exercise and getting your calls in. And then maybe you're also babysitting your kids, so they're right there at the same time, or whatever you're doing. Like you're doing lots of things at once. And that's fine, except you're never actually doing. One of the things with multitasking research that they've found is you're not actually doing multiple things at once. You're just switching your attention between 3 things very quickly. So you're never really present in the time-space moment because you're leaving one thing while you do another thing. So stacking is a little bit different, where you pick an activity, which might be different than the activity that you were normally selecting to meet a particular need. You're picking an activity that allows you to be in the moment, where those three things that are happening at once are like the natural byproduct of the activity that you picked. And so an example, I'm just trying to think how I could make an example out of, so you want to cook, like, so say you want to eat better, so you're cooking, and you've got this recipe. Well, and like you said,
I like that one you talked about, the foraging, where you had in your own life, where you had that idea of whether to go get off the couch and take that walk that you didn't want to take because you had that story part. Maybe that's a good example. I don't know.
Foraging is a good example because, and so for me as a parent of small kids, I was like, every day I'm like, I have to exercise. Every day I'm like, I have to teach these kids something. Not only just watch them, not only just to keep them from harm, but enrich their experience, because we can all just put our kids in our house all day long and protect them from harm, or watch them or meet some basic needs. But then you're going, oh, I gotta find some curriculum or some books or some program to drive to on the other side of town that I have to pay for, like to enrich them. And then you're also like, I have to cook. And then you're also like, I have to eat better. Like you have all day long, all of these things are going through your head all the time. So I was like, okay, come on. These are modern issues. Like this was not something that had to be thought of before. Why? Okay. Right. Okay. Because the thing that you were teaching was a relationship with the land that would breed survival and the future generations. But the way you taught it was just because you were moving over the land and you yourself were surviving. So anyway, I was like, okay, well, I know there's an apple tree 1.5 miles away. And so I'm going to stack my taking a walk with me being with my kids in a very relaxed, fun, I'm outside. I've got the nature that we're all, not only the kids are supposed to have. I wasn't planning on having apples as my stack today, but I'm going to now work with these apples because they're what's here. Oh, look, local organic produce for free. Awesome. And so then just became this like 2-hour walk. And I could completely relax on the walk because it was meeting so many needs. And then what happens is when you actually do the thing, all these other hidden embedded nutrients reveal themselves, which is, hey, I just met 3 neighbors that I never met before. Right. Oh, my kids got to, see a dead skunk on the side of the road. And now it's like a biology lesson, and a natural discussion, not me grabbing a book about something outside of their life, trying to teach them about the world, help them understand where they are and what's going on, and then climbing the trees, and then the 3-mile walk, and then the feeling of the 2 hours, like in a super de-stressed way. So like that's the thing with nature, like nature-based activities are stacked. Like that's how we all got to this place, is everything in nature is occurring at the same time. We're the only thing on the planet that pulls it all apart and then realizes that it needs the food and the sunlight and the water and the community, and then trying to approach all those things individually, because we broke it all down and then we began to perceive that it happens broken down, not integrated. So it's just a way of integrating back towards some natural behaviors that again meet multiple needs. Like that's what stacking is. It's a term actually from permaculture, which is nature already has been doing this. It's only when like humans came in, like we're gonna farm, and then like cleared all the plants and put in one type of plant, and then had to bring back in water, bring back in fertilizer and mulch, and like made 12 tasks where basically no tasks existed before. The payoff for those new 12 tasks was a ton of one type of thing that it turns out couldn't nourish a person after all. So then we had to repeat the clearing of the one thing over and over and over again. Permaculture is like, now you can actually just grow it all in one space and just leave the crap on the ground because that holds the water. So now you don't have to harvest the earth for copper, for pipes, and bring those in. Like, you're just doing more work than you need to because you don't understand how the natural systems work. If you get a little bit of that knowledge, your life can be not only meeting your needs in a more relaxed, de-stressed way.
Yeah, that's an awesome explanation.
The whole thing with I love that because we do that in everything. We make everything so much harder. We make so much more work for ourselves, and that's it's just things. Nature really, they have their own mechanisms for working naturally, and that's what we talk about too. Maya and I talk about when it comes to nutrition, we tend to make it much harder when your body can do a lot of these things already, on its own, if you just step out of the way. So I really do appreciate your work and your perspective on movement in that respect, because like a lot of things that you talk about, like just sitting on the floor every once in a while, going for a walk, with kids, even like just making it easier on yourself as a mom and letting them explore themselves and not trying to micromanage, that is just a huge deal. That can be a big part of de-stressing and enjoying life. So yeah, that's great. I love that.
I just wanted to add with the authenticity, I can't even say it.
Authenticity.
I found in your book was when you really expressed how you didn't want to take that extra walk between the French class, and you realized that you were based on your mission statement that was in line with your life, and so that you reconsidered and then it turned it around. That's where I'd like you to talk a little bit about how real it is, about how you have to go back to maybe getting to that mission statement to kind of funnel back the ideas that really enrich your life, because we tend to want to sit on a couch because we don't have time, or we are exhausted, or we're this and that, where we're kind of distracting ourselves from being able to focus on what we really want from life.
So one thing I think is unique about my work is to really call out the inherent sedentary nature of humans. It's not a sedentary nature, it's a conservation of energy nature that is in you, and I believe will always be there. It's a natural phenomenon, is to not expend more energy than what's necessary. So a lot, again, of what I do is to really call out how much time we go out of our way to craft habitats or environments that require we do less, and then at the same time stress the entire time about our own will or our own motivation. It's also, we're in a time right now where we come in a particular generation where maybe the generations before us didn't really tune in to how they felt about things. So we are definitely check in with yourself and be guided by how you feel and behave based on that. The issue though being, you also have this sedentary nature that I don't know if it's a feeling as much as it's a natural phenomenon. So almost everyone will feel better by not doing. So, and I don't know if we have the skill to discern between those two. So I use my personal mission statement to go, you want more movement for you want more movement for your kids, you want more nature time, you want less driving time. These are all the things that not only you want, you define yourself by. And yet you want to sit in the car right now for 20 minutes and you have all these things in your mind, like, oh, the kids, they just need to rest, right? Like we keep trying to justify why we should be still. That is our first reflex. I mean, when people hear these ideas, usually their first one is like, well, that's never going to work. They have all kinds of flags their brains are throwing. It's like, people can't do that. You can't get, they're talking about people. It's not usually referred back to them. And it's like, yeah, it's hard to get moving. In fact, I actually think willpower is an artificial thing. So that's why I construct my environment so that I have natural discomfort around me. And I just had to lose my addiction to comfort. You know, like we have just, and even to watch myself with my kids, my desire for them to be comfortable is so strong, yet it's the discomfort where growth and movement happen. So we are at a place where we're associating comfort with love, and our job or our role as preparation, but really you're just seeing this slow onset of sloth happening. So luckily my husband's really great at not being interested in being comfortable.
You picked the right man.
There must have been obviously an attraction there on some other level where I recognize that he would make my life uncomfortable, and thus growth would be continuous. And like I'm just constantly checking back because my resistance is so strong. It's like, I just want this. And he's like, really? And I was just like, no, not what I'm looking for. Statement, but like all the movement and the change and the work. Like I'm so sedentary in my deepest core, you know. So it's that's great.
That's so interesting.
That's awesome.
And
I apologize for the feedback. I think one of the things I loved about that is because that's taught in a lot of Zen meditation or any type of the spiritual side of it, where they actually want you to pay attention to being how comfortable you is taking away from you. And so I appreciate that. Allison, you have something?
Well, and I think also we get comfort confused with nourishment too. You know, nourishment is different than comfort. You know, comfort can be, being uncomfortable can be a form of nourishment as well for growth, as you know, in different forms. But and that could be why, you know, a lot of moms like want their kids to be comfortable and you know, but they don't learn from that actually. So there's that, right? And it, you know, it's hard as a mom, from my experience, watching your kids go through disappointment or, you know, or just things not working out. It really sucks to sit there and watch that, but they do learn from that. So that's, you know, they get so much from that we don't realize until we hold space for that. And so, you know, as moms, we really, it's hard, but you got to try it.
Well, and it's also a symptom. Like, I feel like there's not a lot of people paying attention to my disappointment.
Yeah.
You know, and so like, it's just like, I don't want you to like that the disappointment and to feel maybe no one was maybe witnessing my disappointment. So like, I want to be there to witness my own children's disappointment, but to not confuse it with trying to eliminate it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, being a parent is the hardest thing ever.
Yeah.
You know, just in this day and age, I mean, I don't, maybe it's always been like this, but certainly because we have so much free time of not being concerned with really anything, life or death in most cases, you know, that smaller things are heightened and they're important, you know, so anyway.
Yeah.
Just another category that I don't know anything on. So
the generations before
like all
us,
parenting things, I'm like, I don't know.
The generations before us really had a different way of living, and
and always, and it goes on. Like it's been coming to this for some time, for sure.
So we find the appreciation and the gratitude, but find out that, you know, what we always say, the small things don't matter as much as we think they do. So
yeah, totally.
Well, I think we're at the end. What
guys... God, this has been great. Thank you, Katy, again for coming on the show. If you guys want to find Katy, she has a podcast called Katy Says, as well as you can find her website at nutritiousmovement.com. I highly encourage you guys to go and check it out. It's a plethora of just great information and resources. Even like I was going to say, your newsletters are amazing because, you know, you not only share what you're doing, but you also share like inspiration that you get or other things that you come across that you think people might be interested in. And I think that's not something that many people are doing. So you know, that's really cool. And so as well. Let's see, what else? You have anything? I saw something on Instagram where you're working on a new book. Is that true?
I'm always working on a new book. I've given myself a full year off and then a kind of a year to assemble. So I've got 8 other ones that people can start working with, but this one will be the big one of how to transition a life, a mindset, a body, a family, a community.
Ooh,
nice.
So it's a big one.
That's awesome. And you have your classes too, right? At your movement center. And do you still have the online classes going on, or? Okay. Yep. Oh, cool. All right.
There's so many ways to get moving. It's just really possible.
Yeah, absolutely. You give so many great examples, and we appreciate you so much. Thank you, Katy, for doing what you do.
Yeah.
Thank you, both of you, very much.
Yeah,
thank you. And thank your community for helping you. Because
yes, thank you to everyone out there who's ever sent anything. It's even criticisms, like all those things help. In the end, they just help form and great. So gratitude for everything.
I'll have to come visit you out there sometime because I'm not too far. So yeah,
and it's
Swim. I knew I was like, I know I'm going to mispronounce this, and I know people from Swim hate it when you mispronounce, maybe, because that's what I've heard. I don't know.
With however you
say it. Thank you so much.
I doubt that this place didn't come with the Swim name, so it doesn't need to be called anything.
All right, Katy. Well, thank you again.
Thank
All
you.
right,
Nice
bye.
meeting you. Bye.